Collins joins us right now, a Republican from the beautiful state of Georgia. He faced anger at one of his town halls. And, you know, Congressman, you're not the only one. So many of your colleagues did. And I'm wondering if that anger, that vitriol, for lack of a better term, is part and parcel of what's got to kind of ease down here. What do you think?
Well, I don't think so. I think it's just a very much of a very fractious society. Look, we're a society where we invite controversy, we invite discourse, we invite people to actively engage. When we come up here, we don't lose our passion for issues. But I think what we've got to understand is those issues are things that we fight for. But at the end of the day, the men and women who serve in Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, and even in local and state offices, but even our folks that we represent back in the constituents, we got to understand at the end of the day, our differences can be expressed in very peaceful, civil means, and we can get emotional about it.
Right? Not all the time. And I'm not blaming one side or the other. We saw a lot of this in the prior administration. I guess what a lot of people that we've lost our sense of decorum. That doesn't necessarily justify or feed the beastly actions of one guy today, but it does make you wonder about what's kind of happening to us. This incident notwithstanding, that it's getting kind of nutty out there.
Well, it's getting to the point to where it is having a hard time to have an honest conversation about where we may agree or disagree. And I think that is a problem that we're seeing. And I talk about it whether I'm doing an in-person, seeing people in a group setting, or I do my telephone town halls. And it came up for just the other day. And in fact, in one of our telephone town halls, a gentleman said, "You don't represent me because I'm not agreeing with him." And I said, "Sir," I said, "I'm listening to you. I said, I'm trying to take in your advice, but just because I don't agree with you doesn't mean that I'm not representing you." And I think we've got to understand that there is a position to where we can disagree and move forward. But yes, the rancor is getting out there to where people do take it, unfortunately, to extremes like we saw today.
You know, Congressman, I'm just wondering whether, some of your colleagues have expressed concern about going forward on these forums, town hall meetings, whatever you want to call them, that they turned into almost like professional wrestling events where they're pre-scripted to just, get nasty. They're very close to throwing chairs. And I don't know if that's the answer because you want to meet with your constituents, but we talked to one of your colleagues who said, well, I kind of screen who's going there to make sure they are constituents. What do you think of that?
Well, I think, look, I serve the people of Northeast Georgia, and if I do an event and people show up to it, I represent my district first, of course, but I also represent the state and the people, because everybody associates watching it.
Do you want to know that they're constituents first and foremost?
No, I think what we find is if they show up and they're maybe not a constituent, then maybe they have an issue that they want to talk about. I think what we do have to do is we do have to, as public officials, we answer people, we listen to people, but I think also we're very honest with folks that you can yell at me and you can scream at me sometimes, but if it's an opinion that I hold dearly, your screaming and yelling is not going to change my mind. So what we got to do is I'll hear you, but we've got to also understand that tactic is not going to work per se on something I feel very passionately about overhauling our healthcare system, about changing our tax revenue, our code. Those are kind of things that I have ran on for a number of terms now that I've been in for well over 10 years, and we're not going to change just simply because somebody is mad and yells at me. That's not something that we need to have. There needs to be discourse, and then there's a election cycle that happens every 2 years. That's where that proper, motivation should be taken out.
Whether it was during Barack Obama's presidency, sir, where a lot of Republicans just refused to work with him, they felt that they were being excluded, so the hell with him. Now a lot of Democrats who are returning the favor with President Trump, many of whom they still question his legitimacy, even though he won the electoral vote. And back and forth and back and forth. How is that ever going to be bridged? And does the talk that we heard today at Speaker Paul Ryan and Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi about, finding common ground, an attack on one is an attack on all, you've heard all of that. Will that last?
I think it will if we continue to work forward. I'm not a Pollyanna to think that everything is unfortunate by a tragic, crazy man doing something today is going to change completely. But I do think it reminds us, it's a reminder not to just the country, but a reminder to members that there's times that we need to look at each other and we can disagree vehemently and we can actually get into very heated discussions. But at the end of the day, they go home to families, I go home to families, and that this is the time for me, and I think it's a reminder to elected officials, and it was for me when my phone started blowing up this morning from my wife and my kids and my dad. That a reminder that there's bigger things in life than the halls of Congress. I adore and just love being able to serve people. But at the end of the day, the people who are going to be with me for the rest of my life are those folks. And I think it's a reminder that when we come up here, we do our work, we go home. And I would just like for everybody who's watching today just to be a reminder that you may disagree vehemently with Doug Collins, But at the end of the day, that's your right. That's the greatest country. That's why I served in the military. That's why I was served overseas. That's what we fight for. But our fight should be taken out in discourse and not in feeding a visceral reaction to a perceived problem. And for anybody still questioning the legitimacy of a presidency and things like that, it's time to move on. It's time to work to do the productive part.
All right, Congressman, thank you very much for taking the time.